Once you find the DAW that's right for you, you're going to want to look into audio interfaces. And audio interfaces are how we convert the real recorded sound in your room from your microphone, for example, into a digital representation of that sound. Okay, because on your DAW, on your DAW, that's all you're seeing. You're seeing a digital recreation of the actual sound in your recording environment. And so you're going to need an audio interface to make that conversion. Now, there are, again, just like DAWs, a lot of audio interfaces on the market, and it's going to be kind of hard to determine which one is going to be right for you. So let me break down kind of the key things to consider, because just like on all of those articles that you've probably read online, the answer is most all the time, it depends on your situation. So if you're just starting out and you want something very affordable, here's some things to look for in that case. You want something that can handle the number of inputs that you're wanting to work with at the moment. For example, if you're just someone who wants to record instruments one at a time, so maybe one microphone at a time, and then later on you're going to put all of those recordings together, all you need is an audio interface that has maybe one or two inputs for your microphone. These interfaces can be very, very affordable. In fact, that's actually the type of interface I'm using to record this podcast. It only has two inputs, one mic input specifically, so that's all I needed for this. I should say that there are also microphones these days that have a direct USB input. So these microphones actually plug directly into your computer and don't require an interface. So if you want to, again, avoid the cost of investing in an interface, a lot of those USB microphones can actually serve exactly the function that you're looking for. So that's another thing to consider. If you're looking for something that has a low number of inputs, be sure you consider this very important factor, which I actually realized too late, after I had already bought an audio interface like the one I'm about to describe. You do not want an audio interface that is actually powered by your computer. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the audio interface is going to need to be plugged into your computer to transmit the data, the information from your recording to your computer. Now, cheaper audio interfaces that have a low number of inputs, often they're actually powered by that same cable. Okay, it's a USB cable. And if they're transmitting information to your computer and also receiving power from your computer through that same cable, that's actually going to introduce a certain level of noise to your recording. And you're not really going to be able to take that away. Okay, it's just going to be a low level noise that's part of your recordings. So I would heavily consider maybe investing a little bit more than those types of interfaces. Get one that is powered separately by an outlet in your wall. Now, if you're looking to record with more than one microphone at a time or more than one instrument at a time, and maybe you actually want your interface to have a little bit more processing power in it as well, consider getting an interface that has, multiple inputs for different microphones. And also some interfaces actually come with different processors on them. We haven't talked about these yet, but some examples of those processors would be EQ, if you're familiar with EQ, compression. You can actually get those built into your audio interface if you're wanting to process that signal before it even gets represented on your DAW. One final point, if you know you're going to be working with a condenser microphone, which we'll talk about in a minute, you're going to want an option on your interface to power that microphone with something called phantom power. And if it doesn't say phantom power on it, it's probably going to have a switch that says plus 48V. So either or, you're going to want that capability if you're going to be using a condenser microphone. All right, this is actually an example of an audio interface that I use for bigger music recording projects. So the one I'm using to record the podcast, it's got just a couple of inputs on it. It's USB powered. It gets the job done. Okay, I've done enough processing on the mic so that, the little bit of noise introduced through that USB power is not actually very noticeable at all. This interface, however, will kind of help us kind of take a look at some of the parameters we were talking about earlier. So we have all the inputs here. This is where we'd actually plug in our microphone or instrument. okay? And each of these, there are 4 here, there are 4 channels associated with them. All right, we can adjust with these knobs in each channel the amount of incoming signal from each of these different inputs, okay? It's called the gain knob, and there's a separate one for each input. There's also a little button here called line or instrument. Okay, you might see that say line or mic. Could say line or guitar, I guess. I haven't seen all the different variations. All right, so this button for our purposes at this point is going to determine how weak or strong your incoming signal is expected to be. So a line signal, so this would be if the button was not pressed, it's expecting a pretty strong signal to come through this interface, and therefore a higher volume, a higher resulting volume. Now, microphones and instruments plugged directly into this actually will not have a very strong signal, so they need to be boosted. There are other bits of hardware that can boost that signal before going into this, which is where a line input might make more sense. But if you're plugging directly into this, you're going to want to push that in, whether it says instrument, mic, guitar, and it's going to boost the signal for you just a little bit. And on the back here, we have some of the other things that I was talking about. We have that phantom power switch right here. It says plus 48V. And if you switch that on, you're going to be able to power a condenser microphone, like I said earlier. And we'll talk more about the condenser mic later on in this episode. We also have the USB port. In this case, since this is not powered by USB, this USB port would only be for transmitting what's recorded into this and transmitting that information into the computer. And finally, here is our power port. This is where I would actually power the interface with a socket in my wall.